All right. We still have Israel en route to Mount Sinai, and we need to get them there. And we need to look at a few events that take place when they're there. Okay, so let's get going today. We started them on their way to Sinai after Egypt with the appearance of the glory cloud and the fire. And then the chase by Pharaoh, the parting of the Red Sea, a little event that takes place along the way. And the celebration of Israel over their deliverance. And great story there. Second best miracle in the Bible. That's my opinion. The best is the resurrection. But this is as good as it gets. And then we saw the bitter waters at Marah and the giving of the manna taking place, and the significance of that bread from heaven. I remember we actually looked at that idea. It was, people try to say, well, what was it? According to the name, even the children of Israel had never seen it before. What is it? Nobody knows what it is. We know what it was like. It was like a seed. It was white. It was round. It was, it was sweet. Did I say that already? There was a lot of things, but there's nothing on earth, I don't believe, that is like, or that is exactly what they ate. The manna was bread from heaven. John chapter 6. Jesus was very clear. I don't think he was using just an allegory that it's, the bread from heaven in Christ is like, and then he's saying, that was kind of like a bread from heaven also. No, that was bread from heaven. And so there's nothing like it on earth. And God just dumped it out there every day for them. And then I believe the last thing I gave was the institution of the Sabbath day. That day of rest. And a very important thing to understand with the Sabbath, the word Sabbath does not mean seventh. It means rest or ceasing, to cease from something. So the Sabbath day is a day of rest. It's a day to cease from your work. Thou shalt do no work therein. So we find that in Exodus chapter 16, the institution of the Sabbath day. Exodus 16:23 is the first mention of the word Sabbath. And so this idea that God rested on the seventh day was the first Sabbath, no, it wasn't. God rested on the seventh day. The institution of the Sabbath day didn't take place until the children of Israel, and I believe it ended at the cross. Okay, it ended at the cross. There's no celebration of the Sabbath day in the early church. In the book of Acts, they met on the first day of the week. Whenever Paul went out, whenever it says that they met on a day of the week, it was on the Lord's day, on the first day of the week. 1 Corinthians, right? 1 Corinthians 16. On the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store. And so he gives the direct command to collect the offering on the Sabbath day. On the first day of the week, not on the Sabbath day. All right, so there were actually many Sabbaths given to Israel. Many days of rest. And I think it's a good way for us to just simply understand that the Sabbath to the children of Israel is like a holiday to us. It's a day of rest. Okay, what do you do on Thanksgiving Day? Right? You just came through Thanksgiving. You sleep in, right? Maybe you don't. I did a little bit. When I go to my parents, there's too much to do, right? So the kids are all wanting to get up. They don't want to sleep, waste their time sleeping. They want to be out there doing something. So, but you sleep in, you eat some more, and then you add desserts and pies. Then you sleep. Okay, it's a day of rest. It's a day of relaxing. And the children of Israel practiced this numerous times, and when they did that, it was called a Sabbath. It wasn't always on Saturday. The Sabbath day was a day of rest. So it was a holy day. It was a day of rest. It represented, let me turn this off. It represented the day of rest. It was not necessarily just on a Saturday. In fact, many times it was not. Not most of the time, but many times it was not on a Saturday. So there are many weekly Sabbaths and otherwise celebration Sabbaths given to the children of Israel. And that ended when the church age came along. Okay? I think in one of my other classes, in fact, you three guys are going to get a whole lecture on this on Monday. So, all right, let's move on then to Exodus chapter 17, and we're going to pick up there with the next event. I have 3 more events out of the 10. They'll go quickly, and then we'll get them down there at Mount Sinai. So go to Exodus chapter 17, verse number 1. All the congregation of the children of Israel journeyed from the wilderness of Sin after their journeys according to the commandment of the Lord, and pitched in Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So God told them to come here, and then he knew there wouldn't be water, and he was going to give them water. And of course, what did the people do? They chide with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." Moses said to them, "Why chide ye with me? Wherefore do ye tempt the Lord?" You're not chiding with me, you're chiding with God. He put us here. And the people thirsted there for water, and the people murmured against Moses, said, "Wherefore is this that thou hast brought us up out of Egypt to kill us?" You know, when we're in need or discouraged, that is not the time to go around running our mouth because we say things that we don't really mean. Honestly, I just really don't think that they thought that Moses wanted to kill them. They're saying that, out of frustration and so on. And when you're frustrated or discouraged, it's a good idea to watch what you say. Keep your mouth closed. And so anyway, Moses cried unto the Lord, verse 4, saying, "What shall I do unto this people? They be almost ready to stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Go on before the people and take with thee of the elders of Israel." Now you put yourself in their shoes. You're looking around and it's hot. It is dry, and there's no way in the world that Moses or anybody else, humanly speaking, is going to be able to find enough water for all of you people. You think you're probably about to die, unless you remember God. And so the Lord said to Moses, "Go on before the people, take with thee the elders of Israel, and thy rod and wherewith thou smotest the river, take in thine hand, and go, behold, I will stand before thee there upon the rock in Horeb. And thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink." Okay, this rock, this is the striking of the rock at Rephidim. The striking of the rock. Okay, what is this scenario actually? What is actually taking place? Now, there's 2 indications, I believe, in Scripture that this rock actually was Christ. This is not a normal rock. This is a rock that moved. Okay, if God can be in a burning bush, if God can, and by the way, the assumption there with the burning bush is that God went as a burning bush. He didn't just necessarily see a bush and light it on fire and go into that bush. He was the burning bush. That's a possibility. But here we definitely see he was the rock. Look at where we just read, verse 6. "Behold, I will stand before thee in Mount Horeb," upon the rock in Horeb, "and thou shalt smite the rock." I'm going to stand before you upon the rock. Go over now to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Whoops. Thought I had that written down here. Okay, hang on. I'll find it here. I'm sure it's in my passage. 17. 1 Corinthians 10:4. That's exactly right. That's what I thought, and I was second guessing myself. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. The Bible is very clear here about that. Paul here is reminding the Jews of what God had done for them. And he says, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock. That's capitalized. That is the rock of Christ. That followed them. It moved. And that rock was Christ. Okay, you can't be any more clear than that. So, this rock that was struck was actually Jesus Christ. And so Moses gets up, verse number 6 actually. And you did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. He called the name of the place Massa and Meribah, because of the children of Israel, chiding of the children of Israel, because they tempted the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So he smites the rock. One hit, and the rock came breaking forth, and it gave forth all the water that they needed. It looks like Mount Horeb is very close to, some people say actually is, Mount Sinai. I don't know. It's kind of difficult to discern. I think actually that it's very close. Like these are two separate mountains. But regardless, there's obviously an area close by both of these mountains for 2 million plus people to camp at. And I believe that the water from the rock flowed through the valley, through the entire camp, all the time that they were here at Mount Sinai. There is no other source of water there. And I think the indication definitely is that the water continued to flow there. Any questions on that or comments? Okay, Amalek. Let's move on then. Israel's victory over the Amalekites. That's the next main event, number 9, I believe, right? Capital letter I. Israel's victory over the Amalekites. All right, let me mention several first events that take place here. Remember the law of first mention says, and when it happens the first time, it's significant, it's important. And these are several firsts that take place. Then came Amalek, verse 8 of chapter 17. Then came Amalek. Amalek, by the way, is a picture of the flesh. They're a fleshly people. And they're a picture of the flesh constantly coming up from behind and trying to trap you and to deceive you and so on. And the Amalekites come and they fight. And the only way to fight them is through the man of God praying and people praying for the victory. But several first mentions here. This is the first mention of Joshua. Moses said unto Joshua. Now, I don't know why he's not mentioned before. The Bible doesn't tell us where he came from. In fact, Joshua didn't even have any parents. Very good. The son of Nun. Yeah, in case you didn't know that. Becca, did you know that? All right, very good. So, but anyway, we don't know exactly, what his role was before this time. But he obviously was a right-hand man already. Right-hand man. He's a right-hand man to Moses already by this time. And so, this is the first mention of Joshua. Choose us out men and go out and fight with Amalek. Okay, so the first mention of Joshua is also the first prayer of Moses for Israel. It's the first time that we have a recorded prayer of Moses for Israel. No, I'm sorry. Not recorded prayer. We see Moses praying the first time, not his actual prayer. All right, this is also the first part of the Bible to be written. The first time we see Moses writing. Verse number 14. The Lord said to Moses, write this for a memorial in a book. Okay, so he's told to write it. Now, I'm not saying this is the first time Moses wrote. I believe that Moses wrote before this, that he recorded the history of Israel before this time. But this is the first time the Bible actually says that he wrote something. And then fourth, this is also the first reference to one of God's great names. Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner. The Lord is my banner. We've all been to camp, I hope, where we had groups and you had your team banner. Okay, this is not that kind of a banner, but it's similar to that. It's a military term. The banner was in front of a certain division and leading the way. And the point is that God helped them in battle to lead the way. God was the one who won this victory, not the children of Israel, not Joshua. All right, so that's number 9. Number 10 then. Number 10, the meeting of Moses with his family. Moses meets his family there. They come to meet him at Mount Sinai, which I think is another indication that that Sinai's location is on the Arabia side of the Red Sea, not in the Sinai Peninsula. You know how far it would be to travel? His family traveling about 150 miles through this wilderness to meet him. Okay, so now they come to Sinai, and now we've got a lot of events, of course, that'll take place there. Jethro is his father-in-law. It mentions that. In chapter 18 is basically the whole story of this meeting. One of the very wise things that wise advice Jethro gives to Moses, and that is to have a bunch of helpers, have 70 elders who can help him with the judgment upon the people. Verse 25, Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people. Rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of 50s, and rulers of 10s, and they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. Isn't that interesting? This is, I think, the first representative form of government in the Bible. The first representative form of government. Ruler of 10, 50, 100, 1,000, 70 total elders reporting to Moses the hard causes they brought to Moses. He was the Supreme Court, wasn't he? That's the way it worked. So it's the first representative form of government. And these 70 elders will continue through the days. I know there's little breakups here and there, like the Babylonian captivity. But all the way through the time of Christ, there will be elders by the number of 70 for the children of Israel. What are they called in the New Testament? The Sanhedrin. 70 elders. Okay, so the meeting of Moses with his family. All right, that brings us then to Israel at Sinai. That's Roman numeral 3 I have in my notes. Israel at Sinai. This will take us from Exodus chapter 19 through Numbers chapter 10. So Exodus 19 to Numbers chapter 10. According to the Israeli calendar, the Jewish calendar, you can transfer that into our calendar, and you come up with June 15th. Now, what year is up for debate, but June 15th, when Israel arrives at Mount Sinai. Isn't that fun? I think that's pretty neat that you can do that. Who knows if that's 100% accurate, but still. Exodus chapter 19. In the 3rd month, when the children of Israel were gone forth out of the land of Egypt, the same day came into the wilderness of Sinai. They were departed from Rephidim, come to the desert of Sinai, and pitched in the wilderness. All right, so there's going to be a lot of events, obviously, that take place here at Mount Sinai. And before we get into a number of the events, let me actually just mention to you what some of those events are. There's 3 major events, but of course they're going to be, how would I say? But they're going to be pretty detailed, especially a couple of these. 3 major events. The first is going to be the commandment of the law. The commandment of the law. And then you want to hold off on the others, unless you have a computer, the corruption of the golden calf. And then the third event is the construction of the tabernacle. And of course, that one is a very detailed event. So that'll take up a good bit of the time. So we mentioned the commandment of the law first. So let's look at some events that take place before the commandment of the law. Really, this is kind of an introduction to this time period at Mount Sinai. Israel comes to Mount Sinai and immediately is given the heads up, the warning in verse number 9, that God is going to meet with them in 3 days. The Lord said to Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes and be ready against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. So God was going to come down, and descending of God upon the mountain would be accompanied by thundering, lightning, a thick cloud, the voice of a trumpet, an earthquake, smoke, and fire. This is a grand entrance. Okay? I think this is similar. Think about the significance of this event. God, when He wants to establish a new order, a new rule, He makes it significant so that people won't forget it. What do you think in the New Testament is this event? The day of Pentecost. There's no question. Here comes the Holy Spirit, wind, speaking in tongues, cloven tongues of fire. A grand entrance. God doesn't want people to forget it. And so the children of Israel never did forget that, especially, obviously those who lived through it, I'm saying. Boy, they did not forget that. And they remembered it because God made a big deal out of it. I think it's something that we can consider ourselves, know that when God does something, He's going to do it right. And He's going to make it to where people won't forget about it. So God's going to have Moses come up on top of Mount Sinai, and Moses will meet God and record all the things that God wants Israel to do. So, when Moses goes up on the mountain, God literally tells him how to build the tabernacle. This is one of the passages that I like to use, that I really believe that God is interested in detail. And I believe that God, just like He instructs Moses on how to build the tabernacle, you put these bases down and you put the posts in the base. And then you make it a certain way and a certain color, and all of the detail. I really believe that is evidence from things that we've discussed earlier in the semester with Adam and with Noah and with Enoch and these people that God talked to and spoke to. I believe God told them how to do things and how to live, especially with Adam. Told him how to do things, how to grow a garden, and on, how to survive and live and have good life on this earth that God made for Adam. God is interested in detail, and He wants His people to be happy, and He wants His people to enjoy life and so on here on His earth that He made for them. So Moses goes up on top of the mountain, and of course, while he's there, the big story is that back down at the bottom, they come to Aaron and get him to build a golden calf for him. But while Moses is up on top of the mountain, he prays for Israel. He receives all kinds of detailed instructions on how to build a tabernacle and the commandments of the law that are given to him. If you've watched the 10 Commandments, as we joked about, that wasn't all that he got on top of the mountain. He's there for 40 days. How much instruction can you get in 40 days? Okay. So let's talk about the commandment of the law, the commandments that are given to Moses. Now, the commandments that were given are more than 10. Right? This is one part of the one section of the commandments given to Moses. The first is the moral code. Let's call it the moral code. The 10 commandments. The Decalogue. 10 commandments. Exodus chapter 20. And then Deuteronomy chapter 5 is a repeat. Remember Deuteronomy? It's a second law. It's remembering all the things that God had said. So Deuteronomy chapter 5 is Exodus chapter 20. And shall we go through the 10 commandments? You don't want to learn all of the 10 commandments. I guarantee you. What we call the 10 commandments is a very abridged version. The unabridged version is much more detailed. You don't want to memorize all of it. You could. I'm not saying you couldn't, but it's a lot of detail. Chapter 20, verse number 2, God says these words, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. I believe that's the whole first commandment. I am God, don't have any other gods. Verse number 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. There's the second commandment. It's the commandment with all of its subsidiaries, with all of its supporting statements. Commandment number 3 is found in verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day, wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay, so God here institutes this day of worship for the children of Israel. And on and on. Okay, so some of the others are pretty short. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. By the way, later on in the book of Numbers, Leviticus or Numbers, God gives a little bit more detail about killing. As far as manslaughter. And by the way, the United States has many of these principles in our law code. Very, very clear. You can have an accident with a vehicle, but be charged with manslaughter. Even though it was an accident, there was something else that attributed to that accident that caused somebody to die, and so on. So a lot of the stipulations for killing or murdering are found in other places as well. Compare Scripture with Scripture. How about the killing in war? Okay, does this mean thou shalt not kill anybody? What if somebody's attacking your family? Are you allowed to kill them? Are you... as some, like the Amish, they say you turn the other cheek. Somebody comes into your house. Here's my cheek. Is that what that means? Rick? What does it mean? What is the word kill here? Murder. Without cause. Premeditated. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would get that one. It's premeditated murder. It's not going out and killing somebody. And without cause could even, well, I had a good cause. That could even be a little bit adjusted. But to have premeditated murder. What? I can imagine there'd be a situation where you say, I'm going to get revenge because of something that they did, and you might have a very good argument. I can imagine that, but I'm just saying premeditated murder is what this is referring to. If somebody comes into your house and kills one of your children, what do? You know, naturally, you'd want to get revenge. But you're supposed to leave it to God, not God, leave it to government, I believe, Romans chapter 13. And they're supposed to protect they're supposed to punish the evildoers. Anyway, so there's a lot of commandments, a lot of subsidiary commandments that go along with each of the main 10 commandments. So that's one aspect of the commandments. Secondly, the spiritual code. So there's the moral code, then there's the spiritual code. And this is the main, what we think of as the law, the ceremonies, waving the offerings before the Lord, the heave offering, the meal offering, the peace offering, the sin offering. So the spiritual code, we'll look at that in a lot more detail a little bit later here. We're not going to do it now. This includes the feasts, the offerings. The book of Leviticus is almost entirely these kinds of offerings. And you say, well, they're not very spiritual, you know. But they have a spiritual picture. All of these laws have some kind of picture of Christ in them. The ceremonial laws do, and that's why they were supposed to do them. Of course, you can't overemphasize the law. That's what the Pharisees did. So the spiritual code. And then third, the social code. This section deals with the judgments and divine laws of God's new establishment for the nation of Israel. Give credit, right, to our founding fathers. I think it's all our founding fathers, not if you're Canadian. Give credit to our founding fathers for thinking of all the different aspects, so many different aspects of starting a new government. Okay, that's what God is doing here. He's establishing a new government for the children of Israel. Okay. This section includes rules. Let me just throw out some things. I think these are kind of interesting. I won't go through the whole list of everything that I have, but I'll give you some. It includes rules for diet. This is what you eat. This is what you don't eat. Sanitation, quarantine, sickness breaks out, cholera breaks out. How do you quarantine? Leprosy. Soil conservation, taxation, military service, marriage, divorce, many, many, many different social rules. There are about 70 basic regulations in the social code, 70. And of course, many of those have these supporting statements with them, kind of like the moral code does. But there's about 70 basic regulations in the social code found in the book of Leviticus. Let me just throw out to you some of these, some of the more well-known ones. If a man, this is Exodus 21:20, if a man smite his servant or his maid with a rod, and he die under his hand, he shall be surely punished. So, a master beats his servant to the point of death. He's to be punished for that. He that smiteth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. No, it doesn't say with the master, it doesn't say he's to be put to death. He's to be punished. But here he's supposed to be put to death if he smite his father or mother. He that stealeth a man and selleth him, slavery. Or if he be bound in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. Okay? So this is slavery, stealing to sell, to profit off selling other people. That's the cause of death. Now, what's the difference between that and the second one? No, the first one. Smite his servant or his maid. What's the difference? Yes?
The Jews would sometimes sell themselves into service to their kinsmen or someone if they needed money and things like that.
Okay.
So they were
for debt.
They were a bond servant.
Yes. The first one I mentioned has to do with a bond servant or a bond maid. Bondman or bondwoman. That's what I was looking for. The third one is outright slavery. Okay, that is not acceptable according to the law code. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. What does that mean?
Fair punishment.
Okay. I was, we got in a fight. I get in a fight with somebody. And I happen to punch this guy so hard in the face that he loses an eye. Okay? Again, the subsidiary commandments, the supporting commandments for that would say, why were you in a fight with him? But generally, if you're just fighting over something, especially if somebody gets drunk or something like that, you get in a fight, he loses his eye, you lose your eye. That's what it means. If you do something and happen, you're fighting or you're mad at somebody or whatever, you happen to cut off their hand, your hand gets cut off. It's a fair treatment for something that you did. So what does that say? Does that say, oh, that's terrible, you should never have to poke out your own eye or somebody have to poke out your eye? No, it'll make you think twice before you go getting in fights with people. There's a lot of others. He that curseth his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. Oh boy. If a man smite the eye of his servant or the eye of his maid that it perish, he shall let him go free for his eye's sake. And so, think about it. Here's a servant who loses an eye. He's not a very worthy servant anymore. He's not going to be able to be much of a, if you ever go, whatever. Anyway, he's not going to be a very worthy servant. So what is he going to have to do? You're supposed to let him go free so he can provide for himself now. He literally has the debt forgiven him. Many, many others. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer. Neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. If you lend money to a poor person, you can't charge him interest. What does that mean? What would this do? How would this be carried out? Somebody poor comes and says, I need some money. Either you don't lend it to him. That's what I think would happen. You just say, I can't lend it to you. I need my money. I need my money to make money, or I'm not, if somebody is wealthy and God's blessed them, then they would be much more willing to say, sure, I have enough money to live on, plus I can lend you this money interest-free. Now, by the way, all these social codes, they're not part of our code today. I do think that there's many, many principles here, and I think this is a great principle of helping those who are poorer than ourselves be a huge blessing to somebody. Anyway, that's me speaking from the poor side, right? Anyway, but I think it'd be a very honorable thing to do. All right, so any questions on the codes, the laws given at Sinai? Moral code, the spiritual code, and the social code. All right, let's move on to Exodus chapter 32 now. We'll touch on a few things a little bit later on. Yes, we will, with our next main point. But this is, while Moses is on top of the mountain, this unbelievable miracle takes place. It's a miracle because they just threw the golden things into the fire and out came this golden calf. So it's a miracle, pretty miraculous thing going on here. When the people saw, verse 1, that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron and said unto him, Up, make us gods, which shall go before us. Don't you love this? They don't talk like that to Moses. Right? They fear Moses. Aaron, get up. What was he doing? Sitting down? I don't know. Was he sleeping? Up. That's what I say to some of you guys in the morning. Wake up. Up. I think it's funny. I think this is why they know they can get away with this with Aaron. Hey, come on, get up. Make us gods. They know that he's not going to stand against them and say, no, you're not doing this. Anyway, we shall go before us. For as this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what has become of him. Man, these are rebels. Rebels. Aaron said to them, break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of you. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. He probably said, break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your what? He's scared of them. He's afraid. All the people break off the golden earrings, brought them to Aaron. He received them at their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool. And he makes them, and then when he's confronted with it, he just flat out lies about it. So he's scared of the people. He's being ordered around by them. And then he lies to Moses to cover it up. So he's pretty backslidden here, if you ask me. It says he took a graving tool. He made it a molten calf. He built an altar before it. And he okayed it by saying it's a feast unto the Lord. Now, what has just happened here, this, I don't believe, is not him worshiping a false god. I don't believe that he's identifying this golden calf as, what was the name of that calf, the bull? Apis. Apis. I don't think he's saying, this is your Egyptian god. He's not likening it to Baal or anything else. What he's doing is violating the second commandment. He's making a graven image of the Lord. So he's not really violating the first commandment. He is indirectly. But he's violating the second commandment because he's making a graven image of the Lord. Notice what he says at the end of verse 5. Tomorrow is a feast to Jehovah, the Lord. That's all capital letters. So, tomorrow's a feast to the Lord. Now, of course, this feast, I'm not saying, this is Aaron's way of excusing what he's doing. This is our God. We want to be able to see him. This is your God that brought you up out of the land of Egypt. So he's not worshiping a false god per se. He's making a graven image of Jehovah God. And of course, that's just as bad. I'm not making any excuses. I'm just saying that's what he was thinking, at least to excuse it. All right, so God tells Moses, verse 6. I'm sorry, not verse 6. Verse 7. Lord said to Moses, go, get thee down. You got to go down and deal with this. For thy people. I think this is great. God says to Moses, go get thee down, for thy people, which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt, have corrupted themselves. What? I didn't bring them out here. You did. Nobody wants them. Nobody wants them. Oh, too funny. So God informs Moses of what's happening down at the bottom. And so Moses comes partway down, picks up somebody, not literally. He meets somebody. Who is it? Joshua. Joshua was on the mountain with Moses. When we get to the next section, we're going to have a long section just talking about Joshua. Joshua is a faithful man. During these 40 days, what was he doing? He was waiting on Moses to come back down off the mountain. The entire 40 days. People at the bottom lost faith. Joshua halfway up, we don't know what he was eating. We don't know how he survived up there, but he was waiting. He said, I'm not leaving, I'm not going anywhere until Moses comes back down. So we'll look at that some more with him later. But Moses comes down off the mountain and, of course, destroys their altar. What he sees is just heartbreaking to him. Has to be. Verse 19. Came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. The dancing. Back in verse 6. And they rose up early on the morrow and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and to drink and rose up to play. They weren't playing games, they were playing. This is a dance. This is music. The Bible also says, verse 17, when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp. Isn't that what bad music sounds like? It sounds like war going on. Chaos. And he said, it is not the voice of them that shout for master, neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. The wrong kind of music includes the wrong kind of singing, which also includes the wrong kind of action or activity around it, which is the dancing. So it goes hand in hand. And it's interesting to me that the influence of the other gods, I think they got this idea from Egypt. I think that's pretty obvious. They got this idea from Egypt that you have to have a God that you can see. I mean, why can't our God be somebody that you can look at? Why does everybody else have a God they can look at and we don't? And so they want the God, and then they say, hey, in Egypt, they celebrated their gods. Let's have a party. Let's have a dance. And of course, I mean, it's very obvious here. This is an orgy. This is awful. This is horrible perversions going on here. And of course, that's why so many of them die at the end when Moses cleaned the place up. All right, Moses then confronts Aaron about it. Verse 21, Moses said to Aaron, what did this people unto thee that thou hast brought so great a sin upon them? And Aaron said, whoa, 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 whoa. Let not the anger of my Lord wax hot. Thou knowest the people that they are set on mischief. It's their fault. They did this. I mean, he never says what actually happened, that they came to him and he was scared. Now, you know what's funny about this? I love this. Who wrote this? Moses. I don't know if before or during or after how Moses found out or when he found out. But when he did find out, I guarantee you he said, that stinking brother of mine. He said this. And I know what actually happened. I think it's funny that Moses knew the truth. Somewhere in there he knew the truth because he wrote it. Okay. For they said to me, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we want not what is become of him. And I said unto them, whosoever hath any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me. I cast it into the fire, and there came out this calf. I don't know what happened. Did it jump out of the fire, you know? When Moses saw that the people were naked. See? Dancing. Music. Goes all together. Wrong kind of music, wrong kind of activities. So, Moses, what's his response to all of this? Put every man, verse 27, gets all the Levites together and he says, put every man his sword by his side and go out from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay every man his brother. And they did. There fell that day 3,000 men. 3,000 people. These are people who are at the heart of this rebellion against God. All right, so not only does he respond by cleaning up the place and killing a bunch of people that were the rebels, he goes back to the Lord. Moses returned to the Lord, verse 31, said, "Oh, this people have sinned a great sin and have made them gods of gold. Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin." Okay, now, if you're noticing there, that's a place in the Bible, very few of these, where the sentence just ends. Incomplete sentence. "Yet now, if thou wilt forgive their sin, and if not, blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written." I think the purpose here is that Moses didn't know if God could forgive them, or if he would forgive them. God, are you going to actually forgive what they have just done here? Are you going to forgive them? If not, blot me out. I'll take their place. Oh, man. Moses stepping in, filling the gap, willing to die, willing to suffer for the consequences of their sins. "Blot me, I pray thee, out of thy book which thou hast written." The Lord said unto Moses, "Whosoever has sinned against me, him will I blot out of my book." It's not, you can't take the place of somebody else's sin. Jesus is the only one that could do that. "Therefore now go, lead the people into the place of which I have spoken to thee. Behold, mine angel shall go before thee. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them." The Lord plagued the people because they made the calf which Aaron made. Okay, so this golden calf experience and the corruption of the people there. Okay, we'll stop there.